Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Yes, it's one of those videos, one of those starts, because that was abysmal. It was so poor, and I can already feel myself starting to get a bit annoyed about it. And do you know what? Just what a difference a few days makes, because ahead of the game, a couple of days before, Conte was telling us, I'm like really enjoying, looking forward to relishing this test against United because it's going to show us where we are. And you can see excitement on his face. And then after the game, it's like a game against a monster. Oh, I don't like this monster thing. I get, from a financial point of view, yes, I get what he's trying to say, that they're financial monsters, as it were, and Spurs, have to play catch-up, essentially. But I just don't like this image of like the David and Goliath thing, where Spurs are this little plucky team. We're going to talk about that a bit more later, so I'm not going to get into that too much now. But yeah, I don't like this. Spurs are a little kind of timid animal up against the monster. That's creating this narrative where they can kind of find excuses within. There's no excuse for what happened last night. That was just a dreadful performance with a lack of desire, lack of hunger, a lack of fight, and not doing very simple things that footballers should be able to do properly. I'm sorry. That's nothing to do with taking on a monster whatsoever. Would very much be football managers blaming everyone but themselves after a defeat, and that was pretty much what Conte was doing after the game. After that first answer where he said essentially it was the players struggle in the big games, he pretty much turned his attention to the club, and he's talking about more signings. He wants more signings. I felt his substitutions were strange on the night. Conte does get a little bit of flack about his substitutions. People don't praise him when he does make really good substitutions, which he has in a few of the recent games, and I've tried to highlight that. But when he makes poor substitutions, I will also do that. And I felt last night the substitutions were almost a bit like, I don't really trust my bench again. It was one of those. He does this at times, and it was almost, he made 5 substitutions, 3 in the 82nd minute and 2 in the 88th minute. But for me, they weren't, I'm going to change this game. They were like, okay then, game over. Let's rest him and him and him just in case they get any injuries late on. And we'll give him a couple of minutes just to make him feel better. That was all it felt like. It didn't feel like anything other than that. It was Cesc, Lucas and Sanchez to begin with. It was meant to be Skip, and then Cesc and Skip changed. And then Skippy and Spence came on right at the end of the game. Which, there's a part of me that wonders, look, would those players, if you'd brought them on at the hour mark, would they have done any worse than the players already on there? Because for me, young players can bring you that hunger and desire on the pitch. I'm not saying bring them all on, but maybe 1 or 2 of them, whether it be a Skippy or a Sessegnon or a Spence, whatever. So, again, talking about the young players, that's another kind of a little of a dig at the club, at the board, at the transfer window. That, in my opinion, of saying, look, I had another bench full of young players. You want me to be at the top, winning titles, whatever. I can't be bringing on kids into a game where you have experienced players winning the match. Look, he's right in terms of the age. I mean, looking at that Spurs bench, you had 21-year-old Brian Hill, 3 22-year-olds in Sessegnon, Spence and Skip, and you got 23-year-old Japhet Tanganga, meaning more than half the players on his bench, yes, were younger players. However, I would point him towards the United starting 11, which had 22-year-old Jadon Sancho, Anthony, also 22. So 2 of the front 3 attackers are 22, and Rashford is 24, which is that's a very young front line. Diogo Dalot as well, 23 years old, and Anthony Elanga came off the bench. He's only 20. So, I don't buy the youth thing. I never have. I've always been of the mind that you're good enough, you're old enough. Doesn't matter how old you are. And I think that is what we're seeing with Ten Hag, that he's not scared of using these young... I don't say not scared. He's not worried about using these young players because he trusts them. They were outworked. They were outfought. They were outplayed. Conte was tactically outthought as well by Ten Hag. Obviously, like I say, not helped by the fact that the players were so poor, but also outthought. United were just flooding around Spurs at every opportunity. So I don't think using age or a lack of signings is anything, because that starting 11 put out, that midfield 3 whatever I say about them trying to adapt and all that, Bissouma's been one of the best midfielders in the Premier League in recent years. Højbjerg has been Spurs' best player of the season so far for me. Bentancur is a 3-time Serie A title winner. They looked like the inferior midfield, and they shouldn't against a midfield of United that, has had its critics as well. So, yeah, I don't buy that. It felt like a deflection for me. And look, I don't want to be really down on Conte at all, because, look, let's get it straight. There is no doubt that Conte has improved Spurs since he came in for me. Since November, the point haul on its own demonstrates how much he's improved them, and he's improved certain players as well. But I feel he needs to be slightly wary that this narrative that he creates himself, where he always needs better players, it looms almost as large across his career as his trophies do. You look through every club he's been at, and I'm not saying I disagree with him, but it just seems such a constant theme that at every club he's worked at, the answer always seems to be, I want better players. You look at the silverware he's won, all the fantastic things he does on the training ground as well. But every one of these clubs, you'll be able to find quotes from Antonio Conte at some point saying, I need better players, essentially indirectly, whether it's I need more money spent, or you look at other clubs and what they're spending and we're spending, blah, blah, blah. It's a constant theme throughout his career. And I just feel it does him a disservice, because he's a brilliant coach on the training ground. Honestly, people rave about how he's on the training ground. And I think he almost is creating this narrative around himself that he's a guy that if he doesn't get better players and top players, he can't win things. And I don't think that's the case with him. I do think he's a better coach than even he gives himself credit for. Look, he's taken on a tough task at Spurs, without doubt. It's the toughest one he's probably taken. Sorry, when I say tough, I mean relatively compared to what he's taken on in the past. Because in terms of a sleeping giant, Spurs have been dozing for a while. They've been in a deep sleep. They haven't won, obviously, a league title in 60 years, whereas, obviously, other teams he's taken over, they've won them more recently. All this talk about monsters, and, he's made this big deal about how Spurs finishing fourth last season was a miracle. It was incredible. It was like the greatest thing that's ever happened. And look, Tottenham fans, we've witnessed Mauricio Pochettino, not that long ago, only a couple of years back, taking Spurs to 3 consecutive top 3 finishes, including a second place. And then the next year, finishing fourth and reaching a Champions League final. So nobody's going to be sold on this narrative that, well done, little Tottenham. Congratulations, that's fantastic that you're up there fighting with the big boys, because Poch did all that. He did all that, and I'd probably say with less backing than Conte's had. Conte's had 9 players in the 2 windows he's been at, and not for an inconsiderable amount. Look, I know people will moan still that there should have been more, but you total up those transfer fees, and then you probably also add on what Kulusevski will cost when Spurs pay for him. He's had a lot of backing, and Pochettino's managed to do what he did with, I'd say, less in terms of the average amount spent on his players as well. I don't think that's going to wash. I don't think he should keep going down that line for me. Look, I'm no public relations expert or anyone that would tell him how to speak afterwards, but I think if he keeps going down it, do you know what it feels like to me? Do you remember, was it Harry Redknapp said they never had it so good or something like that? I can't remember what it was. I could be doing him disservice, could be paraphrased, I don't know. But it's got those kind of vibes. And I noticed back then under Redknapp, a lot of Spurs fans would start to say, like, when things start to go wrong, but we've never had it this good and all that sort of stuff. And I feel like if Conte goes down that road, then he ends up getting less patience when performances aren't great and the football's not great and things like that. Not making out Spurs some like promoted side or anything that, taking on these monsters. It's just not the case. So, yeah, I'm not having that. I'm not having that at all. And look, January is going to come along. We know that they need more investment. I get the impression Spurs know that as well. And they need to be intelligent signings. They need to be signings. They need to be signings for the now. Otherwise, we're going to hear about it forever from Conte. Look, Conte was named 4th, I saw, in the top coaches in the world in 442's list this week that they did. And, last year he brought a weaker squad than I'd say he has now into 4th place in the Premier League. It wasn't a miracle. It was really good coaching. Obviously, Arsenal messing up as well. But it was really good coaching, and he took them on a terrific run of form. And obviously helped a little bit by the 1 game a week thing towards the end as well. But, I do feel that Spurs are far better than he makes out they are. And it's down to him to kind of use this undoubted coaching ability he has to squeeze every last drop out of these players, because I think he can. I really think he can. Daniel Levy has to do his bit. He has to ensure there are funds for new arrivals in January, of course. And Spurs can have a strong second half to the season. But I do feel like Conte has to also play his part in instilling a belief in these players that they can go out there and beat whoever they want to beat. Because, he may be saying this privately, but if the public message is about kind of monsters and everyone else being better, and I know some fans will say this is a kind of realism thing. For me, I don't know. Having a public voice that is kind of doubting where Spurs are at, I think it allows players to have excuses for their performances. Like, we're not going to beat them anyway. I just feel it has, and I've never liked it when other managers have done it as well. And Poch used to do it as well. Giving praise some Poch some praise in this. But he's also in the past, he used to do similar. He would talk about other clubs being far better and in better positions. And I didn't always agree with that mentality of it either. Look, Conte is happy and settled at Tottenham. As I've said last week, nothing changes with one bad result. But he is an emotional man. And this night at Old Trafford needs to serve as a lesson for everyone. And that includes him as well, I think. Maybe also for us, the media and the fans as well, for various things we want. Maybe aren't always the best thing in every single game. On that, I do think 3-5-2 and 3-4-3, they are. I think they're going to be really helpful in terms of changing them up for different games, changing them within games. So that's fine, but obviously we probably shouldn't demand that we see a certain formation in certain games, because maybe we don't know as much as we think we do, and that includes me, very much so.